From the very beginning, Roman's death made him suspicious. Something was wrong, a quiet unease creeping into his heart from the moment the tragedy occurred. When reading Roman's will, the only content mentioned was that he, not his two younger brothers, would be conscripted. Besides that, there was only a confession of fear, a vague reason too unclear to explain the death. What made everything even more confusing was that Roman was about to marry Flora, the girl he had always longed for. A happy future was within reach. Moreover, the noble class who were married always had ways to avoid conscription. If Roman truly wanted to escape, marriage was the most legal and effective path. So why, despite all those escapes, did Roman still choose to end his life just because of the fear of being drafted? He couldn't stop thinking. Everything was truly illogical. That was why he asked Hans if he had ever been close to Anthony Barco before. Hans confirmed that in his eyes, Anthony was the person Roman was closest to, until recently when their relationship began to fracture. Hans speculated that the rift started when Roman began discussing marriage with Miss Flora Lawrence, the event that seemed to be the origin of all changes. A marriage alliance between Dmitri and Lawrence would be a major obstacle to the Barco family's plan to annex Lawrence's land, a risk they could not accept. And the most effective way to extinguish this threat was to ensure that marriage never happened. Someone had taken action to break that alliance at its root. A cautious servant called Roman and honestly recounted that a few days ago he had received an invitation from the Barco family for a party. Roman slightly startled, his face showing surprise upon hearing the name Barco, the enemy he surely did not expect to proactively send an invitation. The servant explained that the invitation was sent just as Roman entered the abandoned villa to train and asked how to handle the letter. Roman smiled coldly, thinking that the audacity of the Barco family was despicable, or perhaps they underestimated him too much. Whatever the reason, Roman felt a surge of anger. The complacency in his eyes turned into a dangerous look. They were making him uncomfortable. Roman calmly asked again when the party would take place. The servant replied that the party would be held exactly 1 week from today. Roman leaned back comfortably in his chair, wearing a meaningful smile. He ordered, "Tell them I will come." A peaceful scene appeared, the white mansion under a clear blue sky, signaling an upcoming change in the situation. The servant brought a young guest to the door of the room, announcing that Roman was waiting inside. The young guest nodded in thanks. Before leaving, the servant whispered into the young man's ear, "Oh, and don't be surprised if Lord Roman looks different than before." The young man responded confusedly, Yes." A soft creak sounded as the door slowly opened, signaling someone entering the training room. Kevin stepped over the threshold, holding a sword, surprised to be called. "Lord Roman, did you call me?" Roman turned around, recognizing the newcomer as Kevin, speaking gently. "Oh, it's you, Kevin." Kevin was stunned by Roman's new appearance. In his mind echoed Hans's warning. That was what Hans meant when he said Roman had changed. Roman approached and briefly asked, "Have you adapted well?" Kevin quickly replied, grateful for Hans's help. However, Kevin hesitated, as if doubting something, which immediately caught Roman's attention, and he asked again, "But why?" Kevin confessed that he had thought a lot about his role while staying here, but still didn't know how he could help Roman. He continued saying that Roman had taught him to live loyally, but he was just an ordinary boy from the streets, unsure what he could do in the future. Roman looked at Kevin seriously, answering his question with certainty. "Your role, I intend." Roman ended his words decisively and powerfully. "To make you my sword." Kevin stood silently, stunned by the new responsibility assigned to him. Kevin was stunned when Lord Roman declared his intention to make him his sword. Surprise and confusion were clearly visible on his face, unable to believe his ears. Roman remained calm, raised 3 fingers, and clearly stated that Kevin's role could not be decided by anyone else. To let Kevin choose, he presented 3 different paths. Roman began with the first option. If Kevin did not want to wield a sword and spill blood, he could support by becoming his aide. That was a path that did not require fighting. Roman further explained that Kevin could learn from Hans and carry out safe tasks behind the scenes. That alone would be enough to fulfill his role. Moving to the second option, Roman gently drew his sword from its sheath, saying Kevin could choose to become the sword that protects him. His voice carried a hint of seriousness, showing this was not an easy path. Kevin awkwardly admitted that he had never touched a sword in his life. Roman calmly acknowledged that and continued to explain the demands of the second option. Roman made it clear that if Kevin chose to become his sword, he would have to prove his will by enduring extreme pain. The harshness of the challenge began to reveal itself. In an abstract image, Roman described in detail the pain Kevin would endure, every muscle, every joint tormented to the limit. Only by enduring it could Kevin advance on the warrior's path. Roman affirmed that mere words were not enough. Only by truly enduring and overcoming the trial could Kevin prove his will. Kevin swallowed nervously, worry evident on his face. Finally, Roman fully drew the sword from its sheath, preparing to present the third option, the remaining path Kevin could consider. The atmosphere became tenser than ever. The red-haired boy froze when given the third option, to lift the sword and cut off his own arm. The words struck like lightning, shocking him, while the cold sword lay ready at his feet as if awaiting judgment. With wide, tense eyes, the boy swallowed dryly upon hearing the condition. If he could endure the pain caused by himself, then he would have another path to prove himself. Facing the leader with icy eyes, he heard the affirmation. That voluntary pain would be the start of a training process faster than anyone else's, if he had enough will to carry it out. The pink-haired man continued telling about the demon of lunacy, a wandering child unaware of his warrior power. But thanks to iron will, he rose up and became one of the 4 most powerful guardians. With sharp eyes, he pressed the final question. Now, what will you do? Whatever the decision, he promised to utilize Kevin in the most effective way, as a valuable tool. He stood silently before the sword. The last words echoed in his mind. How you will be used is entirely up to you. The scene shifted outside Dimitri's castle, where a shabby old hut stood. Just looking at it, one could tell it might collapse at any moment, a setting contrasting with the splendor inside the city. The story returned to his childhood. That was where he was born, a baby crying in a torn blanket, inside a dilapidated hut on the city outskirts. From a young age, he had to work hard to help his family survive. The image of father and son carrying firewood through the forest was a familiar part of his memories. He grew up doing heavy manual labor, always alongside his parents. There was hardly any hard work he hadn't experienced. That hardship forged his resilience and endurance. Despite working tirelessly, his life never changed. The hard-earned results were always brazenly stolen by others. The stronger always benefited from his sweat and effort. That was the cruel law of this world, where the weak could only accept suffering losses. That was why the moment witnessing that event was deeply engraved in his mind. His bloodied face showed a determination never to forget what he had seen. Before him was the back of a powerful warrior, radiating absolute overwhelming force. That was the first time he truly felt real power. He took the sword with a troubled mind. He did not understand what cutting off his own arm would lead to, but he knew this was a turning point in his life. He trembled but was determined. If that could make him stronger, if it helped him become like Lord Roman whom he admired, he was ready to pay the price. As long as he could escape this poor and oppressed life, he would do anything. With a resolute gaze, he spoke the answer. I will do it. The pink-haired man looked at him calmly. Without saying another word, his eyes seemed to confirm his choice. Without hesitation, he raised the sword, his hand gripping tightly, preparing for the cruel act he had never imagined doing in his life. In a decisive motion, he swung the sword. Determination clear on his face, he bet everything on this fateful moment. Kevin screamed in rage, his eyes white as if mad. In despair, he put all his strength into the decisive strike with an unyielding will. In response to that fierce blow was only Lord Roman's calm, cold gaze, and in an instant the sword swung like lightning, cutting through Kevin's resolve. A footstep echoed in the quiet hallway, accompanied by a choked thought. Unbelievable. Hans, who had once abandoned everything to serve Lord Roman, could not help but be doubtful upon learning that his lord had isolated himself for a week to train in the abandoned house. In the ancient hallway, Chris suddenly called Hans's name. Hans turned around, surprised to see his deputy captain in an unexpected situation. Chris announced that Lord Roman had completed his training and was now having a private conversation with Kevin. More importantly, he instructed that no one was allowed to interrupt them. Hans was surprised to hear the name Kevin mentioned. In his eyes, Kevin was just an unknown nobody. A sword dripping small drops of bright red blood. A whisper came from someone yet unseen. Who is that? Just a moment later, the severed arm flew off, blood splattering in the air. Kevin fell to the floor, in excruciating pain from the fatal cut. Kevin groaned in pain, his body trembling on the blood-soaked floor. Before him, Lord Roman stood silently. Kevin's sword fell to the ground with a harsh clang, ending all illusions of power. Kevin helplessly collapsed with a heavy thud. Before him, Roman stood still, coldly observing without any disturbance. Roman looked down at Kevin with a calm gaze, one that held no pity but seemed to assess the result of a test. The night sky fell silent, creating a pause after the recent trial, as if preparing for something about to happen. Outside, a man hurriedly knocked on Roman's door, urgently calling out, "Lord Roman," as if sensing something unusual had occurred. Chris panicked when he saw Roman's sword covered in blood, anxiously asking, "Are you hurt?" The sword has blood on it." Roman turned away, his voice calm but firm. "It's nothing." Facing Chris's worry, he repeated resolutely, "I said it's nothing." Roman smiled faintly, his sharp eyes flashing. "That is not my blood." His words shattered the panic in the room. An inner voice revealed the truth. The moment Kevin swung the sword down, Roman had placed him into an illusion that he was completely unaware of. The technique used was illusion magic, a rare secret art that deceives the opponent's mind so they do not realize they are falling into a trap. Roman intended to test Kevin's will through a brief illusion. However, before the spell could fully take effect, Kevin unconsciously injured himself. Roman smiled faintly, his eyes showing admiration. In his heart, he acknowledged Kevin as brave, for that action proved the young man had courage far beyond ordinary people. Meanwhile, hands tossed and turned, thinking in bed. He counted down the remaining time until the party, only 2 weeks left, an important moment approaching. In another room, Kevin was checking the wound on his arm. In his heart, he silently calculated the time left. Only about 6 months until he must go to the battlefield, a fate awaiting him ahead. Roman gave a meaningful smile. With sharp eyes, he silently thought that he still had much to teach these young men. Both Hans and Kevin were promising pieces in his plan. Roman stood before the large door, seriously warning that the type of magical martial art about to be taught possessed extremely dangerous power and required absolute caution. Kevin was stunned with amazement upon learning that he would be taught a combat magic, and Roman firmly confirmed this. Roman explained that although it is called magic, in fact this is a skill once used by the Demon of Lunacy, an ancient martial art hidden within the martial academy from his previous life. The name of this secret martial art was revealed, Ghost Soul Demon Art, creating a mysterious and dangerous atmosphere. Roman warned that once using this skill, the mind would gradually be invaded by evil energy, pushing the user to the edge between reason and madness. He continued to emphasize the danger of the skill, describing it as a martial art flowing backward through the veins, causing extreme pain that even a moment of carelessness would come at a price. Roman recalled the Demon of Lunacy, one with a fierce desire to become his sword, who dared to endure ultimate pain to master this ultimate technique. With the image of Kevin cutting his own hand, Roman affirmed, if Kevin could do that without hesitation, then he was fully capable of mastering this brutal martial art. Roman warned that the more proficient Kevin became with the ultimate technique, the more pain he would have to endure beyond what he had experienced before. Despite all the dangers, Roman decided to teach it because this was the only skill suitable for a teenager like Kevin, someone who knew nothing about magic, but could learn the fastest in the shortest time. Kevin sincerely expressed deep gratitude to Roman, admitting that he could not find words enough to describe what he felt. However, after a moment of hesitation, Kevin could not hide his doubt. He truly wanted to know why Roman placed his trust in him. Kevin confessed that although he had sworn loyalty, he had yet to prove himself worthy. He feared he might betray that trust at any moment. With a serious gaze, Kevin looked up and decisively asked, why did Roman trust him so much? Roman just smiled and answered simply, because I want to. The simplicity of the answer stunned Kevin. He repeated as if not believing his ears, just because you want to. Without another word, Roman turned his back and left, announcing that training would begin tomorrow and told Kevin to rest early. In a silent moment, Roman suddenly recalled that question about trust was also once asked by another person, the mad demon from his previous life. Roman remembered a philosophy that shaped his decision. Blind trust is not something natural, but only appears when we dare to trust first. And in Kevin's case, Roman was certain of one thing. He was someone who would never betray that trust. Kevin silently vowed that one day, when strong enough, he would understand the greatest taboo, betraying the supreme demon lord. A new morning began, sunlight shining across the fortress, signaling another determined day of training. In the training room, Kevin put all his strength into the exercise, gripping the wooden sword tightly and striking hard at the log in front of him. Roman closely followed every move, emphasizing that the foundation is core, and every technique must be executed precisely. Kevin focused all his attention on each movement, not allowing himself to be distracted even for a second. Facing Roman's strictness and decisiveness, Kevin responded firmly, showing determination. Yes, sir. A blond man sitting nearby yawned loudly, showing boredom as he watched the training from afar. He complained, unable to understand why an unknown person like Kevin was being taught how to use a sword. Jealousy surged within him as he wondered why he was not taught anything despite also following Roman. Believing that just following Roman would soon make him strong, he now felt disappointed because he felt ignored, as if he did not exist at all. The blond young man muttered to himself, feeling that just holding a sword would at least allow him to learn something. The frustration rose, making him start to wonder if he should directly ask why. He looked up at the sky, his gaze distant and full of thought, as if trying to find an answer from somewhere. The question lingered in his mind. Should he take the initiative to ask or continue to wait patiently? Time passed slowly. He sat quietly on a wooden crate day after day, waiting in silence, and his patience gradually wore thin. Unable to endure any longer, he suddenly stood up, slammed his fist down, causing his glove to fly off in suppressed anger. He walked straight to Roman, decisively calling the name of the person he always respected, but could no longer remain silent before. Sir Roman. The blond man stepped forward to face Roman, firmly stating that 2 weeks had passed since he decided to follow him as a subordinate. Kevin interrupted, pointing out that the first week was wasted because Roman left without notice to train in the abandoned house. The blond man continued, saying that for the past week he had silently watched Roman teach Kevin. If the reason was due to his previous disrespectful behavior, he sincerely apologized and hoped to be taught anything, no matter how small. Roman silently observed him, his gaze calm but making it hard for others to guess his true thoughts. Roman calmly asked if he had not been told to observe and learn. The young man immediately reacted, asking if Roman really just wanted him to stand and watch passively. Roman replied that everyone has their own suitable learning method, implying that the way he taught Kevin and him would not be the same. Roman explained that Kevin started from zero, so he needed step-by-step basic guidance to reach an intermediate level. Regarding the blond man, Roman affirmed that he was different. Having been defeated before, he only saw Roman as a stronger opponent. Therefore, even if taught, he could not truly absorb it but only reluctantly accepted it. The young man asked sharply, so must he continue to stand aside and not participate? Roman answered decisively, no. Immediately, Roman threw him a wooden sword. He caught it in surprise, his eyes full of astonishment and emotion. Finally, he was allowed to step onto the real training path. Chris was stunned to realize the sword he was given was only a wooden sword. Meanwhile, Roman calmly explained that a clear result was necessary to accept reality. Roman suddenly proposed that Chris spar with Kevin, leaving both shocked. Doubt briefly appeared on their faces upon hearing such an apparently unreasonable suggestion. Roman continued explaining that although Kevin was the opponent, he himself would guide Kevin on how to defeat Chris. In this match, Kevin would act on his behalf. Roman set a clear condition. If after the match Chris still believed he was right, Roman would personally train him. The seriousness in his words made the atmosphere heavy. Kevin panicked upon learning he would have to fight Chris, a level 2 knight. Meanwhile, Chris was full of resentment, unable to believe he was compared to an inexperienced rookie. A feeling of insult surged within Chris. He gritted his teeth angrily, the question echoing in his mind. Who does he think he is to look down on me like that? Instead of retreating, Chris resolved to accept the challenge. He confidently declared that in this match, he would prove he was not someone to be underestimated. The wide blue sky symbolized a new beginning. The upcoming match carried expectations, pressure, and the pride of both men. Chris and Kevin faced each other on the training ground, their determined eyes meeting. Behind Kevin, Roman watched everything, ready to intervene if necessary. Worry was evident on Kevin's face. He turned to Roman, expressing his apprehension about facing a level 2 knight. But Roman responded calmly, emphasizing that Kevin had nothing to lose and nothing to fear from failure. Roman seriously reminded him that there are always stronger people in this world. He recalled the pain Kevin's family had suffered at the hands of the Blood Fangs gang, and affirmed that in Chris's eyes now, Kevin was just an opponent to be defeated. With a cold gaze, Roman asked bluntly, would he keep retreating from every threat or dare to face them? After a few seconds of silence, the student tightened his grip on the wooden sword and declared decisively he would accept this challenge. Chris showed great annoyance at having to fight a kid who had been training for less than a week. The opponent's confidence and determined eyes made him even angrier. Roman calmly observed, realizing Chris thought this match was just an excuse for him to be controlled. He ordered the start of the match with a firm tone. Although Chris knew this was just a sparring match, his cold eyes showed he would not hold back. At the signal, Chris rushed forward at incredible speed, swinging his sword powerfully at his opponent, clearly determined to win absolutely. As he charged to attack, Chris silently vowed not to lose to someone who had only trained for a few days. A thud sounded as the two swords clashed fiercely. Surprised by the strength of the blow, the student's eyes widened, shocked by Chris's overwhelming dominance. A clack rang out as part of the wooden sword broke off, proving the powerful impact in the just-begun match. The two charged at each other in a tense fight, the sound of wooden swords clashing continuously, showing the intensity of the duel. The red-haired boy put all his strength into his strikes, attacking quickly and powerfully, causing the surrounding air to tremble. While attacking, he lost balance as his opponent dodged, forcing him to spin around to regain footing and maintain his stance. A sudden counterattack caused him to fall hard onto the stone floor, hitting the ground with force that flipped his body back and made him cry out in pain. The blonde fighter raised his eyebrows, surprised that the match ended so easily, contrary to his initial expectations. He looked at Roman, wondering why he trusted such an inexperienced person with this match, while Roman just stood silently observing. Facing the opponent in pain, the blonde man still did not understand Roman's intention, but was ready to deliver the finishing blow. With a sinister smile, he swung his sword with full force, determined to end the match with a merciless strike. The bright sky above set a tense backdrop before the decisive moment in the duel between the two. Roman stood silently watching, his calm but meaningful gaze as if waiting for something to happen. A punch as strong as thunder struck the young boy's stomach, causing him to collapse in pain. The blow carried not only physical strength but also overwhelming spirit. Blood spurted from his mouth, his face twisted in pain. Despite giving his all, the power gap was too great for his body to endure. He reached out to touch the ground, struggling to stand up though his hand trembled from exhaustion. His will would not allow him to fall. Before him stood a cold opponent, firmly holding his sword. The distance between them seemed not just a few steps, but a deep chasm of strength. The opponent looked at him calmly, acknowledging that he was tougher than expected. For someone unable to use mana, lasting this long was surprising. Still, he bluntly advised him to give up. The previous strikes were not full power, they were just warnings. He bowed his head, still gripping the sword hilt tightly. The warning did not shake him, but his body was clearly exhausted. He coldly emphasized that if he wanted, he could have defeated him from the start, but since this was a sparring match, he held back. Blood still dripped from under his chin onto the cold stone floor. The feeling of failure and injury mingled with each heavy breath. The opponent's gaze grew serious, issuing a final warning. If he stubbornly continued, the consequences would go beyond just a few surface wounds. Despite the blood flowing at the corner of his mouth, the young boy suddenly smiled defiantly. In his eyes there was no fear, only an unyielding spirit. From afar, Roman smiled coldly with hidden meaning, causing the opponent to suddenly feel uneasy. The blond man frowned, as if sensing something was slipping out of control. The young boy stood up, his eyes blazing despite the wound on his face. Clenching the sword hilt tightly, he declared decisively that he would fight to the end, making the atmosphere tense to the point of suffocation. Chris calmly spoke, ordering his opponent to prepare, his eyes shining with confidence and coldness before the rematch. The teenager swallowed nervously, his face tense. In his mind, a mysterious voice echoed, giving instructions. Raise your sword and defend from the front. Suddenly, the boy's eyes widened in surprise as the warning voice said, Chris is about to strike sneakily. The sense of danger made him ready to react. When Chris gave the start command, he immediately rushed forward at lightning speed, swinging his wooden sword fiercely like a whirlwind aimed at his opponent. A clack sounded as the two swords clashed violently. The boy staggered, trying to withstand the tremendous force of Chris's attack. The boy immediately received further instructions from the mysterious voice. Step back to the side. Chris will kick. Aim for his chest. Without hesitation, he shifted his weight and stepped sideways exactly as instructed, dodging the upcoming attack. Chris swung a powerful kick, but only hit the air as his opponent nimbly dodged to the side, causing him to falter. Immediately after, Chris was caught off guard by a counterattack. A very strong blow struck him, sending his body flying off the ground. A thud echoed as Chris fell hard onto the stone floor. He groaned in pain while his opponent held his sword firmly, ready for the next move. Kevin lay gasping on the cold ground, his face contorted in pain. In his daze, a voice echoed in his mind, urging, "Get up, Kevin." Hearing the familiar voice, Kevin was stunned. His eyes widened as he recognized the owner of the voice, none other than Lord Roman. Lord Roman stood calmly there, transmitting his thoughts through mana, saying that from now on he would guide Kevin this way throughout the match. Kevin was amazed by the ability to convey thoughts through mana. He had never known magic could be used so subtly. Another command rang out in his head. Jump to the right. Kevin immediately reacted, his eyes fierce, no longer hesitant. Kevin leapt to the right, narrowly passing Chris's sharp attack, dodging the powerful strike thanks to timely guidance. Chris's eyes widened in surprise seeing Kevin move so agilely. Clearly, he had avoided the previous strike instinctively or guided by someone. Turn back, aim for the left side of his chest. The next instruction echoed in Kevin's mind, making him instantly spin around preparing to counterattack. Kevin executed a precise spin, putting all his strength into the strike. His wooden staff flew with incredible speed, catching Chris off guard. But just as the strike was about to land, Chris suddenly delivered a strong kick to Kevin's stomach, pushing him backward and causing the counterattack to fail instantly. Kevin staggered to his feet after the blow, eyes full of determination. In front of him, Chris was ready, sword rushing forward at lightning speed. Panting and clutching his chest in pain, Kevin was frustrated for missing a chance to counterattack. He realized he was too slow to strike in time. While Kevin hesitated, the familiar voice sounded in his head again, decisively ordering, "Raise your sword and defend from above." Kevin immediately responded. Chris jumped down from above, attacking with a strong downward strike, but Kevin raised his sword in time to block, creating a sharp clashing sound echoing in the air. Not letting Kevin recover, Chris continued with a sideways kick. Although warned, Kevin's reflexes were still not fast enough to dodge. Chris's powerful kick sent Kevin flying far away, crashing hard onto the warehouse floor. The impact echoed throughout the the arena, shocking everyone. Lying sprawled on the cold ground, Kevin groaned in pain. Blood flowed from his nose, but his eyes had not completely lost their fighting spirit. Chris looked at his opponent struggling to get up with surprise, silently admitting that he had been far tougher than initially expected. The surprise turned into extreme rage. Avalokiteshvara's eyes blazed, his pupils glowing with fury. However, in Roman's mind, there was still something worth hopping for. An opportunity, a possibility he himself wanted to witness. Chris was about to declare the end of the match. Meanwhile, Kevin, though exhausted and gasping for breath, still stood firm, gripping his sword with rare resilience. Suddenly, from Kevin's bloodied lips, a challenging smile spread. This match, for him, had become unexpectedly interesting. Kevin's gaze turned toward Roman, filled with admiration. To him, Roman's power and ability to control the situation were nothing short of divine. Kevin realized that the opponent he was facing was a level 2 Air Knight, a rival superior in both strength and experience. Yet, Kevin also noticed that every movement of his opponent matched exactly what Roman had predicted, as if he was controlling the entire match. Chris began to blame himself for his weak stamina. If he could have followed the instructions more perfectly, Kevin might have lost long ago. A metaphorical image appeared in Chris's mind, himself as a puppet pulled by Roman's strings. He could not deny it was as if Roman was toying with him completely deliberately. After receiving instructions, the red-haired teenager immediately launched a counterattack at surprising speed, his sword rushing toward the opponent like a whirlwind. Chris focused intensely, his sharp eyes spotting an opportunity flashing, instantly unleashing a powerful strike with an energy wave shaking the space. However, the teenager's unexpected punch caught Chris off guard, hitting his face and causing him to stagger momentarily. Chris was stunned. He did not expect his opponent to dodge the final strike and counterattack immediately. A doubtful question arose in his mind. Could it just be a coincidence? The teenager was fully aware that his strength was still far inferior. Though a genius of Dmitri, Lord Roman's true power was on a completely different level. With deep respect, he affirmed that Lord Roman would be the master to whom he would dedicate his life. Even if sometimes he did not understand why, he was determined to obey every command. From the bottom of his heart, he tightened his grip on the sword, telling himself that if he wanted to become Lord Roman's sword, he, a weak commoner, had no choice but to become stronger. With a shout of determination, he poured all his strength and willpower into launching a spirited attack with all his fighting spirit. The sword swung down powerfully like thunder, creating a clack sound echoing throughout the arena, as if the space itself was shaken. The result of that strike was blood continuously dripping from Chris's mouth. Though silent, it was clear he had taken a critical hit. Sir Chris stared coldly at his opponent, enunciating each word in his final warning, clearly showing his impatience. Despite bleeding, the red-haired young man stood firm, speaking coldly to warn his opponent that if he wanted to continue, the price would not be light. Though blood still flowed on his face, he smiled challengingly, revealing a resilient will and no fear of threats. Roman's smirk made Sir Chris uneasy, as if he himself was the one being watched and controlled every step of the way. Ignoring all warnings, the red-haired young man raised his wooden sword high and declared decisively, "Let's end this." Determination blazed in his eyes. Sir Chris's anger flared fiercely upon hearing that arrogant declaration, causing him to grit his teeth in fury, his whole body radiating killing intent. In his rage, Chris roared, insulting his opponent as a coward, his hand gripping the sword hilt tightly as if ready to crush him. Stamping his foot hard on the arena floor, Chris accepted the challenge, preparing to unleash all his strength for a finishing blow. He charged like a whirlwind, striking down from above with murderous intent, shouting that he would end the match right here. The red-haired young man did not back down, provocatively declaring that his opponent would regret it when he saw his own arm broken. The boy's eyes were full of determination, highly focused as he faced the fierce incoming attack from his opponent. He took a strong step forward, showing an unyielding will despite his body already dripping blood. Both rushed at each other at extreme speed, eyes blazing, weapons in hand ready for a fierce clash. He shouted loudly, blood still flowing at the corner of his mouth, but his fighting spirit blazing, ready. The nobleman began to feel uneasy, sweat beating, as he witnessed the unexpected ferocity from the one he had underestimated. He swung his heavy wooden sword in a fierce horizontal sweep, the momentum relentless as if wanting to sweep everything away. The strike was so strong it forced the opponent to retreat, the whoosh of the wind echoing throughout the arena. The nobleman's eyes widened in surprise, silently exclaiming, "I didn't expect him to close in from that direction," while the observer calmly said, "It's not over yet." He quickly spun around, maintaining the initiative, his sharp eyes never leaving his opponent for even a second. Without hesitation, he charged forward, deciding to deliver a finishing blow. The command in his head rang clearly, "Attack now." The teenager lunged at his opponent, delivering a powerful slash accompanied by a whistling wind, showing his determination to defeat him completely. The blonde nobleman sneered, thinking the attack was too slow and predictable. He prepared to counterattack, believing his opponent had revealed a weakness. Suddenly, his eyes widened in astonishment as he noticed something unusual. The gaze of the observer with mysterious purple eyes seemed to foresee the future. In an instant, the teenager's attack sliced through the air, startling the nobleman who hurriedly bent down to narrowly dodge. Two eyes met, one full of anger and determination, the other suddenly realizing the approaching danger and gradually showing panic. With a resounding shout, the teenager poured all his strength into the slash, creating a strong wind tearing through space, as if wanting to end the match with a single blow. The white-haired observer's purple-tinged eyes suddenly flashed a slight smile, as if he knew beforehand that the teenager would accomplish something unexpected. The nobleman struggled to catch his breath, sweat beading on his forehead, showing he was beginning to be pushed into a weak position after a series of continuous attacks. The last strike knocked him down, his hands still gripping the sword as if clinging to hope for survival, while the teenager closed in, giving him no chance to counterattack. The nobleman's eyes flashed with extreme anger, red energy radiating as a sign he was about to unleash all his power in a desperate counterattack. Before the opponent could defend, the red-haired teenager was suddenly hit by a precise counterattack. A powerful smack echoed as his body was thrown backward. The blow was so strong that he fell heavily to the ground with a dull thud. The victor held his stance, while the defeated lay motionless on the tiled floor. The victor silently bowed his head, while the white-haired man observed from afar, arms crossed over his chest, expression unreadable but full of meaning. The white-haired man silently assessed. He had predicted that the first feint was just bait and had accurately targeted where the opponent would move. It was all a cold calculation. The red-haired teenager lay gasping on the floor, exhausted but his eyes still burning with determination. The victor looked at his fallen opponent with surprise, whispering, "He really doesn't know what tiredness is." He slowly stepped toward the white-haired man, admitting defeat. "You win," the white-haired man responded with a promise. "As promised, if you want, I will start teaching you tomorrow." With a serious look, the white-haired man lifted the injured teenager and said, "The decision is yours." A door opened in the evening light. Inside, soft groans echoed, a sign that he had awakened after the match. The uniform shirt gently fell onto the bed with a plop. A long day ended, leaving behind challenges and a new future awaiting. After the intense match, he stood alone in the room, wondering why he agreed to participate in that battle. A feeling both regretful and puzzling passed through his mind. He silently thought he gained nothing from the victory. The match lasted longer than expected, and he almost became the loser. However, the final image of the match remained clear in his mind. The unexpected finishing move changed the situation, leaving the opponent no time to react. He recalled the previous duel with Roman. The way he struck then was exactly like today's situation. The memory of that day haunted him repeatedly. He wondered if, without having competed with Roman, he could have defeated Kevin without using mana. Doubt began to intertwine with belief in his own ability. A soft breath escaped, then a smile appeared on his lips. He suddenly realized something amid his doubt mixed with humor about himself. Standing before the morning sunlight, he asked himself if he had truly matured from the recent experience. Just one match, yet it felt so different. Echoes from the past returned in his mind. The teacher's question, "So what will you do?" still unanswered, but inside him an answer seemed to form. He raised his head, looking straight at Roman, his eyes no longer doubtful but full of determination. He knew he had to say this. Steady and sincere, he declared that he would find his own path to strength by studying and observing Roman. He realized that just from one match, he had improved significantly. Kevin's moves were not random but carefully calculated. Every move was part of a plan, proving someone was directing him. He sat in deep thought, feeling that understanding Roman's combat instructions was already a challenge beyond his ability. But then he recalled that during Kevin's training, Roman had deliberately said some things he could overhear. A thought arose in him. Roman, or rather Lord Roman, was now completely different from the fool he once was. He didn't understand what had happened, but his current power surpassed even Captain Jonathan. From this moment, he silently vowed to always observe and learn everything from Roman. No matter how long it took, he would not stop until he could surpass that man. A slight smile appeared on Roman's lips, as if he had read the determination in his eyes. Without words, an understanding formed between master and student. Roman looked at him, eyes serious yet encouraging, then spoke. It was time to continue the training process without hesitation. A week passed since that match. A renewed atmosphere spread everywhere, signaling that change was approaching. In Barco, a social party was underway. Under the bright sunlight shining on the magnificent castle, a new chapter was about to begin. A clear morning in the bustling neighborhood, whispers and chatter echoed everywhere. In front of the large notice board in the square, a resident eagerly asked his friend if he had heard any news yet, creating an atmosphere of curiosity spreading throughout the town. The news mentioned was none other than Roman Dmitri. On the notice board, an official document bearing the seals of two great families announced the termination of the engagement between the Dmitri and Lawrence families, causing the people to buzz with surprise at this sudden change. Rumors about the Dmitri family began to spread as people chatted animatedly around the notice board. A curious person asked about the latest news, sparking the conversation. The other replied that the rumor involved Roman Dmitri. His engagement to the Lawrence heiress had been completely cancelled, stirring public uproar. In the tavern, some townsfolk commented on Viscount Lawrence's announcement. They believed blaming Flora was just an excuse. In reality, the bride's family realized Roman was unworthy. A noblewoman expressed disbelief upon learning the engagement was broken off just as the threat from Barco still loomed. She suspected Roman was worse than the previous rumors suggested. In the kitchen, two maids whispered about the rumor that Roman had defeated the Blood Fangs group. One was skeptical, thinking it was all staged to save Roman's honor. Loud laughter echoed in the luxurious room of a nobleman. Behind him was the emblem of the Barco family, indicating pride and scheming at play. A man holding Roman's letter of broken engagement could not hide his surprise and mockery. He thought Roman was too easily manipulated, falling into a trap without realizing it. Anthony Barco, eldest son of the Barco family, raised his glass with satisfaction. Knowing Roman would attend the party, he confirmed everything was going according to their plan. The day of the noble party finally arrived. The sky was clear and the sun bright, bringing a joyful atmosphere that spread throughout the magnificent mansion. Roman stood pensively in the room, seriously considering something. His sharp gaze showed he was preparing to face something important. In front of him was a splendid ceremonial outfit, sparkling with many colors. Roman frowned, unable to believe his eyes, asking Hans if he really had to wear this. Hans seriously explained that this was Roman's first public appearance since the broken engagement, so he couldn't dress casually. Expectations were placed on every detail. Despite being caught in a long explanation, Roman remained calm, responding only with a quiet not yet making a clear decision. Hans continued talking endlessly, emphasizing that they had put so much effort into obtaining this ceremonial outfit, a masterpiece he was extremely proud of. With a determined look and an expectant tone, Hans seriously questioned, "You don't really intend to wear it, do you, Lord Roman?" Under the pressure of Hans's piercing gaze, Roman slightly grimaced but forced a smile, helpless before his loyal steward's determination. Finally, Roman agreed to wear the ceremonial outfit. From behind, Hans joyfully cheered excitedly, affirming he had known for sure that his lord would like it. A sigh sounded as heavy armored footsteps struck the ground. Someone was approaching, signaling an impending change. In the bright morning sunlight, a blond knight stood with crossed arms beside a carriage, impatiently waiting. He grumbled because his companion had not yet appeared, even joking that Lord Roman might arrive before him. Just as he finished speaking, a hurried voice rang out. A young soldier rushed over from afar, running and apologizing, his footsteps pounding on the stone floor, irritating the knight. The young soldier blushed and panted, running while awkwardly adjusting his helmet. He embarrassedly admitted he was still not used to wearing armor and moving quickly. The knight angrily asked the reason for the young soldier's strange appearance. He hesitated and explained that he couldn't find any armor that fit, even at the village forge. Looking at the small and clumsy soldier before him, the knight's eyes showed disappointment. In his heart, he couldn't believe someone like that had almost defeated him. The knight's contemptuous gaze made the soldier even more flustered. Meanwhile, he tried to remove the cumbersome helmet on his head while grumbling about the inconvenience. The knight straightened up and sternly pointed at the soldier. He began to lecture, his firm tone allowing no carelessness in the role of a bodyguard. The Dmitri family emblem shone brightly behind them, as proof of his words. As Lord Roman's bodyguards, they were not only protectors but also representatives of the family's honor. The young soldier stood upright, his eyes shining with determination. He quickly nodded in agreement, promising to remember and act worthy of the expectations. Seeing the soldier's serious reaction, the knight paused briefly. Inside, he felt an indescribable emotion, uncertain whether it was anger, worry, or rising faith. The blond knight coughed awkwardly, then quickly regained composure, offering that if the young soldier had any questions, he should ask. The soldier immediately brightened with gratitude and responded with a sincere thank you. While they were talking, the blond knight suddenly frowned and reminded the soldier that his helmet was crooked. The soldier was instantly surprised and hurriedly corrected it. The scene shifted to a massive and magnificent castle under a clear blue sky. The lively sound of "ah" echoed, as if signaling an important ceremony or event about to take place inside. Inside the great hall, sparkling light reflected off the lavish dishes elaborately arranged on the banquet table. The scene clearly showed the luxury and elegance of the ongoing party. Amid the lively music and laughter, nobles chatted happily. A gentleman continued a conversation during the elegant evening party. Ladies in elaborate dresses gathered chatting in the great hall. Each wore an excited, curious expression at the gossip spreading through the party. A nobleman raised a glass of wine, pouring and saying he had heard that Roman would also attend the party today. His words sparked many other whispers. A man at the party spoke out criticizing Roman, saying he knew well about the Barco family's plot with Lawrence but still came to the party. They thought breaking off the engagement, then appearing at this party was shameful. A noblewoman added sarcastically that calling Roman a fool was justified. According to her, if he had any intelligence, he would have chosen a side and not put himself in such an awkward position. The crowd continued to gossip, saying the entire Dmitri family was being dragged into a difficult situation because of Roman. Although they were a major power in the northeast, maintaining ties with Barco made others see them as greedy and shameless. When some guests talked about Roman, one sarcastically said he came to the party to prove he had learned his lesson. These words made the crowd laugh, while a girl in purple quietly glanced at them suspiciously. The girl turned to ask the man beside her about Roman Dimitri's character. He replied she would soon see for herself, meanwhile mocking Roman as a sloppy, skinny man who was unpleasant to look at. The conversation continued with increasingly bitter sarcasm. Another person interjected that Roman was arrogant just because he was the eldest son of the Dmitri family, and if he were a woman, he would do everything to break off the engagement too. Mocking laughter echoed throughout the hall. As the atmosphere grew chaotic, a hum suddenly sounded, causing everyone to immediately pay attention. All eyes turned toward the entrance as a solemn voice announced the arrival of the heir of the Dmitri family. The crowd began to whisper, unable to hide their surprise. The large doors slowly opened, light flooding in as a sign of an important appearance. The announcement rang out clearly, "Lord Roman Dmitri has arrived." A decisive step was placed on the green carpet, marking the start of a powerful presence. All eyes focused on the door, waiting for the main character to appear. Roman appeared with silver hair and sharp eyes, exuding confidence and outstanding charisma. His changed appearance was like a fresh breeze that blew away all previous prejudices. In a neat military uniform, Roman walked through the hall, leaving a surprising silence behind. Faces that once mocked him were stunned, including the girl who had once been his fiancée. Whispers of astonishment echoed everywhere. People could hardly believe Roman's transformation: tall stature, overwhelming aura, and unusual silver hair. No one recognized the weak boy from before. Sophia quietly observed the looks and whispers spreading throughout the banquet hall. Though no one spoke loudly, the surprise at Roman's appearance was clearly reflected in their eyes. The atmosphere seemed to freeze as Sophia silently stepped forward, her eyes scanning the other guests who attentively followed her every step. Roman maintained a calm but firm expression as his gaze swept across the audience. With a composed attitude, he gently offered a formal greeting. Before Roman, Sophia bowed politely and introduced herself gracefully. She was Sophia of the Grisel family, expressing proper respect. Sophia continued shyly, explaining that the Grisel family was not a famous house, but her father, Viscount Grisel, had been loyal and contributed to the kingdom of Cairo for many generations. Sophia's face suddenly brightened when she heard Roman smile and affirm that he knew well about the Grisel family. His response left her stunned and touched. Roman gently explained that the Grisel family had over 100 years of history, a long tradition he fully remembered and respected. The scene shifted to an earlier time. A retainer handed Roman a stack of documents about the families in the northeast region at his request, a deliberate preparation. In a quiet study room, Roman quickly gathered books and papers, prompting a servant to curiously ask why he suddenly took interest in this information. Roman flipped through the documents, telling himself that if he represented the Dmitri family, basic courtesy was mandatory. He needed to know each family he was about to meet and how they maintained their reputation through generations. Roman continued to surprise by showing deep knowledge about House Grisel, detailing their long history and famous timber industry. He even mentioned Sophia's younger brother recently learning to control mana, which amazed her. Sophia was astonished by Roman's detailed understanding of her family. Moved, she responded to his congratulations with eyes mixing surprise and gratitude. The atmosphere between Roman and Sophia grew close and friendly. Those around seemed to sense the change, looking at them with suspicion and envy. Whispers rose among the crowd. Many didn't understand what was happening, shocked by Roman's behavior completely opposite to previous rumors. Magner, eldest son of House Volt, approached to greet Roman respectfully. Roman politely responded, continuing to maintain a calm and skillful image among the nobles. Roman stunned Magner by showing knowledge of House Volt's history, especially his father's great contributions during the war. Magner was moved and grateful for the sincere praise. A pink-haired lady named Eris came forward to greet Roman. She was amazed, unable to recognize him after such a long time. Roman smiled politely, replying with a subtle compliment. Roman inquired sincerely about Eris's mother's health. This made his image even more elegant and considerate in the eyes of those present. Roman continued to mention the business relationship between House Dimitri and House Heroes in the past, affirming that it was thanks to this that his family could develop and prosper as they do today. With a charming smile, Roman expressed deep gratitude for House Heroes' contributions. His tactful way of speaking gradually made people look at him with a completely different perspective. Guests at the party began to discuss Roman's transformation. The man they once thought was reckless and often drunk. His confident and polite presence surprised them. A gentleman approached to start a conversation, admitting he had a wrong impression of Roman because he always appeared with a glass of wine. Roman replied humorously, making the atmosphere more relaxed. Suddenly, a servant appeared and whispered into Roman's ear, informing him that someone was waiting to meet him privately, which immediately put Roman on alert. Roman frowned upon hearing the servant say the caller was Lord Anthony and that he wanted a private meeting. Roman's eyes darkened and his previous calmness vanished. A coldness rose within Roman. He realized the moment had come. He would confront the one who dared to trouble him at this party directly. Meanwhile, the morning sunlight shone over the courtyard outside the mansion, where knights from various families gathered, preparing for the next big event. A group of young knights expressed surprise at the scale of the event, seeing countless knights from major families converging in this place. A rookie asked about the meaning of the social party, but was cut off by teammates who said they would never be invited. He was then reminded about his crooked helmet, causing sighs of frustration from his comrades. From afar, some unfamiliar knights sneered upon seeing a red-haired young man in ill-fitting armor. They showed disdain upon learning he was Roman Dimitri's bodyguard. Under a stern gaze, the commander ordered the red-haired young man to remove his helmet. Though hesitant, he had to obey while mocking laughter echoed non-stop. In the middle of the hallway, two knights sat gossiping, bluntly calling the group before them losers, showing no respect even though they stood nearby. They continued with sarcastic remarks, mentioning Roman Dimitri as someone rejected by his entire family, then mocked the young bodyguard accompanying him, belittling both his physique and abilities. The mocking laughter had not ceased when another bitter remark was uttered, insulting the honor of the Dimitri family. The boy's heart trembled strongly, his eyes wide open, signaling the anger smoldering within his chest. Amid the lavish party, Roman suddenly froze when his eyes met someone in the crowd. His confused expression and focused gaze reflected something that had just been awakened within him. In a corner of the party, Flora was happily chatting with friends. The murmurs mixed with laughter, and the radiance emanating from her made those around find it hard to look away. Flora's radiant beauty makes the surrounding scenery seem to fade into an illusion. Her clear eyes and gentle smile captivate everyone as if drawn into a dreamlike world. Anthony suddenly appeared, draping his arm over Roman's shoulder in a friendly manner. With a half-joking smile, he asked Roman who he was staring at so intently, causing Roman to awkwardly call out his name. Anthony turned his gaze toward the blonde girl and asked Roman if he knew who she was. The surprise in his words indicated that she was someone impossible to be unknown in aristocratic circles. Anthony revealed the identity of the girl, Flora Lawrence, dubbed the Beauty of Lawrence, making her beauty even more magnificent in the listener's eyes. Roman was stunned, repeating the name Flora Lawrence in his mind, as if from that moment her name was deeply imprinted in his memory, impossible to erase. The door to the private room swung open, and Roman appeared with a cold expression. He entered with the calmness of someone prepared for an important meeting. Anthony was already seated, looking cheerful and confident. He eagerly asked Roman about his unusual attitude, unaware that the atmosphere was gradually becoming tense. Roman silently observed his opponent with sharp eyes. A decisive thought flashed through his mind. So this is Anthony Barco. Roman entered the room with a cold demeanor. To Anthony's surprise, he invited Roman to sit down, mockingly friendly, and began the conversation by commenting on Roman's significant change. Roman glanced at the banquet table, where leftover wine glasses and traces of the previous party remained. He quickly realized someone had left just before he arrived. A wine bottle rolling under the table confirmed Roman's suspicion. Clearly, Anthony had deliberately left the room empty when he arrived, as if preparing for a private confrontation. Roman smiled subtly with hidden meaning, already guessing what Anthony was scheming. Though not fully understanding the purpose, he decided to engage, accepting the role of interlocutor. With a radiant face, Roman casually recounted his past of spending money to care for his appearance. But now, he confidently boasted about his change without expense, as a way to affirm that he had turned a new page. Roman softened his tone, looked directly at Anthony, and politely said, "Anyway, it's good to see you again." But behind the greeting lurked caution. Anthony responded with a forced smile, unable to hide his guardedness. Though silent, his eyes seemed to scrutinize every gesture of Roman. Anthony laughed, raised his glass for a sip, then said half-jokingly that he hoped Roman's words were a compliment. But he also admitted he had never understood Roman's past actions. Roman kept a slight smile, gently raised his glass, and asked back. In the past, Anthony did not hesitate to bring up old matters. He sarcastically mentioned how Roman had turned his back on him to pursue a political marriage with the Lawrence family, but was eventually caught with Anthony's cousin in a private room. His smile became mocking as he said, "Really, Roman?" The white-haired man showed sarcasm when recalling the past, emphasizing that although he kept secrets for the other during social parties, he never expected someone engaged to behave so recklessly. The brown-haired man, sitting comfortably with a half-smile, began to set conditions. He implicitly priced it. The other's attendance at the party was an agreement to exchange, keeping secrets in return for cooperation. A triumphant smile appeared clearly on his face. Without beating around the bush, he directly mentioned the real goal, an arranged marriage with the Barco family, full of political intentions. The white-haired young man was momentarily stunned. The unexpected proposal made him think intensely, unable to hide his suspicious and displeased eyes. A wave of dizziness surged. His heart pounded strongly in his chest, as if the recent proposal had struck a still unhealed wound from the past. By the heavy door, a figure stood silently. In the stillness, a sigh echoed, signaling the torment of regret tearing at the soul. He looked down at his feet, his heart heavy. The tormenting thoughts became clear. He had betrayed Anthony. Memories retreated to the past. He had once convinced his father to arrange a marriage with the Lawrence family, a carefully calculated move that had now become a burden. His trembling hand clenched the doorknob tightly. He could no longer avoid it. This was the last chance to mend the fractured relationship. The door opened, and a light, reproachful greeting sounded. "Roman, you're late. Sit down quickly." The atmosphere in the room remained the same, but everyone's eyes were ready to watch every move of the newcomer. Anthony introduced the girl accompanying him as his cousin, Emily Barco. The polite girl greeted Roman, while he responded hesitantly, unable to hide his embarrassment. Anthony took the initiative to ask permission for Emily to drink wine with them, citing that she was nervous, as it was her first time attending such a party. Roman reluctantly agreed because she was Anthony's cousin. Anthony immediately instructed Emily to pour wine for Roman, but Roman refused and said he could pour for himself, maintaining a clear distance. Anthony's face darkened briefly. He reproached Roman not to act arrogantly just because he was engaged, his words laced with malicious provocation. Roman intended to clarify matters related to the engagement with Anthony, but before he could speak, Anthony quickly interrupted, declaring he no longer cared about the Lawrence family. The answer surprised Roman. He smiled lightly, seemingly feeling hopeful about being freed from this complicated bond. Anthony patted Roman's shoulder reassuringly, telling him to forget everything and just enjoy himself tonight. The atmosphere became friendly, but behind it lay an unpredictable calculation. Roman raised his glass and drank it down with hearty laughter, unaware that tonight would change his fate. In his drunken stupor, Roman's eyes gradually closed, completely losing awareness of what was happening around him. Roman woke up in the dark, groggily realizing he was lying next to a strange woman. Both were naked, causing him extreme confusion. Shock surged as Roman sat up abruptly, bewildered and unable to understand why he was in this situation. All memories of the previous night were a blank. A sudden scream calling Roman's name startled him to turn around. Anthony appeared, his face full of anger upon witnessing the scene before him. Anthony glared furiously, clenching his fists in rage. He shouted, questioning Roman about his unacceptable behavior. Roman was stunned, his eyes panicked, unable to believe what was happening, trembling as he weakly denied it. The girl also flusteredly tried to explain, attempting to cover herself with a blanket. While Roman stammered, trying to justify the awkward situation he completely did not remember. In his confusion, Roman could only repeatedly tell himself that he remembered nothing, as guilt and fear overwhelmed his mind. Anthony coldly sat by the candlelight, clearly telling Roman that what he did with whom was his own business, but involving a Barco lady was an entirely different matter. Roman sat motionless in the dark, trembling under Anthony's pressure. He realized this matter was too serious to ignore. Anthony presented two choices. Either Roman must confess everything to everyone and accept the cancellation of the engagement, or instead, Roman must marry Emily, join the Barco family to atone for his mistake, and mend the relationship between the two families. Anthony admitted he was angry, but still offered a path to forgiveness, only if Roman agreed to become part of the Barco family. In the suffocating atmosphere, Anthony forced Roman to make an immediate choice. Roman was fearful, swallowing dryly in silence, unsure of what to do. Scene shifts to a white-haired man sitting solemnly, his eyes sharp and cold. He had understood everything that had just happened. He analyzed that if rumors spread that Roman slept with someone from the Barco family, the broken engagement would be a fatal blow to the Dmitri family's reputation. The Dmitri family had already been scrutinized for their commoner origins. Such a scandal would cause them to lose everything. The man knew Roman was not strong enough to withstand his father's wrath. However, Roman could not choose to betray the engagement either. He truly loved Flora, making the choice even more harsh. If he proactively canceled the engagement as he wished, Roman would damage Flora's honor. That was something he absolutely could not allow to happen. After fully understanding the situation, Roman sighed silently. When pushed to the brink, the other person chose to end everything by taking their own life. In Roman's mind at this moment, that person's death was not a tragedy, but an escape. He hoped death would erase all his sins and responsibilities. Roman coldly concluded, that person never did anything by his own will, just a weakling without the courage to face reality. That was the true Roman Dmitri of the past. He glanced sideways, his purple eyes flashing contempt. In his heart he had only two words for his old self, weak and pathetic. Before the proposal of an alliance between the two families, the Barco representative had yet to realize the change in Roman. He enthusiastically persuaded that the union of the two houses would be a shocking event throughout the northeast region. The man continued babbling, emphasizing that no one could stop them if the alliance succeeded. Supreme power in the area would be in Roman's hands. Roman frowned, cutting off the man with a cold remark. He was shocked to learn that the sole reason for this marriage was power and status. Roman set his wine glass down on the table, his gaze sharp. He could not accept entering a meaningless marriage just for cheap political gain. The man began losing patience, warning Roman that if he refused, he would reveal everything that happened in that secret room that night, leading to the collapse of the Dmitri family's reputation. Before the threat could finish, Roman delivered a kick straight to the man's face, causing him to fall backward. No longer the weakling of old, Roman stared coldly and said, "Listen carefully." Roman leaned back in his chair arrogantly, bluntly rejecting the marriage proposal from the Barco family. He affirmed that the Dmitri family had no obligation to accept an unreasonable demand for such a trivial reason. In the splendid banquet hall, guests chatted lively amid music and laughter. The gentle atmosphere made the party even more luxurious and bustling. In the crowd, a lady stood out with shining blonde hair and a radiant smile. She gently turned her head as if discovering something interesting during the conversation. The girl happily greeted Roman as he approached. Her face lit up with excitement, while Roman calmly stepped forward, showing no emotion. Roman casually explained that he had just handled some important matters and needed to leave the party immediately. The refusal made the girl momentarily disappointed as she tried to keep him there a little longer. Roman politely apologized and repeated that he had urgent business to attend to. As soon as he finished speaking, whispers spread throughout the hall as people grew curious about his sudden departure. Without letting anyone hold him back, Roman walked out of the grand hall amid the bowed farewells of the servants. He did not look back, his eyes firmly fixed ahead. Suddenly an angry shout rang out from afar, causing Roman to pause. It was a voice full of hatred he could never mistake, a voice deeply imprinted in his memory. Approaching the source of the noise, Roman discovered a group of soldiers panicking and whispering. The atmosphere grew tense as all eyes turned toward him. At that moment, a sudden strong blow struck Roman's face. His eyes widened in shock. The person who struck was definitely no ordinary foe. The sound of metal clashing rang out repeatedly as Kevin's sword was knocked from his hand, flying forcefully to the arena floor. The opponent's pressure was so great that his arm went numb, unable to hold onto the weapon. Kevin collapsed amid the jeers of the opposing soldiers. Under the blazing sun, he bowed his head, struggling to resist amid worried calls from his teammates behind. But the enemy only mocked, treating his defeat as entertainment.